Let's move on to GRC and how can that help defend against social engineering?
There's two things that will cut a social engineer off at the knees. Number one is the phrase, I can't. When I'm on the phone with someone, in fact, yesterday, I was literally making a social engineering phone call, trying to get someone to change my password. And it wasn't that the person didn't want to help me, right? I could tell they wanted to help me, but they said, I can't help you, right? I either don't have permissions or it's against policy and I literally just can't help you. I wish I could, but I can't. That stops a social engineer right in their tracks. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and this was really kind of weird. I was on a social engineering engagement one time. It was a physical, and I was supposed to walk into a retail establishment, try to get access to the communications room, right? Where the servers are in the back and all that stuff. I walk up, and as soon as I start my initial, hey, I'm Chris, I'm from corporate IT, and I need to, before I even got my first sentence out of my mouth, the person that looked at me, she said, hold that thought. She picked up the phone and she dialed, I think, her manager or someone and handed me the phone. And it just, I'm like, wow, okay. Hey, this is Chris from, all of a sudden I've got to switch gears from face to face to on the phone, different person. I have no physical feedback signals. So involving a second person is an incredible strategy to knock a social engineer off his game. Now, granted, I'm not a method actor. I'm not an improv person or something like that. So sure, there could be people who can handle that situation, but it just throws another barrier for the social engineer. So if you combine the I can't and you combine that with involving another person, you can really be effective against social engineering. So now, how does this relate to GRC, right? To actually answer your question, how's that? First and foremost, the I can't relates to the implementation of least privilege. If the help desk person doesn't have domain admin and they can't do everything under the sun in the system, then they just can't do it. So making sure they have least privilege. Also, and this actually relates to a specific CMMC requirement, it's separation of duties. If it requires two people to perform a function, then it's not very likely that a social engineer is going to be able to social engineer both parties to get that accomplished, right? I was actually introduced to this very early on, even before my security career, when I worked at the Federal Reserve. I started in the wire transfer department, and we had what we called dual control, which is basically the same thing as separation of duties. There is literally a requirement of two individuals to perform a function. It's really interesting when a wire transfer is sent through the Federal Reserve, it actually takes a total of 4 people to actually have the wire done. It's the person from the bank calling, the person who in the Federal Reserve who answers the phone, and then a second person at the Federal Reserve calls a different person at the bank. And so it takes literally 4 people for a wire transfer to be sent through that process. And the whole concept behind it is it protects you from fraud, and it also protects you from social engineering.